Hello there guys, welcome back to another video. It's Friday, it's the afternoon, which means one thing. It's time for another big old chat about all the news from the games industry, because this is VGC Off The Record. My name is Steven McInerney, and I'm your host today, and I'm surrounded by not two, but three of the most wonderful people in the games industry. First of all, we've got our very own big boss, of course, Mr. Andy Robinson. How are you doing today, my friend? You good? I can't even hear you now after all that. Is that my fault?
That's how many podcasts are we in now? About 8 or 9, and that's the first time we've had
I'm not starting this
mute,
again, so that'll do. We'll pretend that never happened. Yeah, that's actually not too bad, actually. But muted because you've got nothing to say, or mute you've got too much to say and you don't want to talk about.
Well, I think what it kind of cut out was me talking about how often I've been down the pub since they opened up in the last week. So that's why I sound a bit croaky.
I'm going to see live music tonight in a bar. Ooh. I can't wait. I know, yeah. Like I'm going to Blues Kitchen in Manchester. A bit of jazz and a bit of blues, man. I'm not really particularly either.
You're going to be screwed when we publish this ahead of time. Now people are going to be down there hunting you out, mate.
What, my mum or something? Like, yeah. And no one else. Like
I knew you'd be down here listening to live music. We're actually a few of us are going for a curry. Jazz. We're going for a curry later. I won't tell you the curry house, so my mum don't turn up.
And that's the difference between you and me, I guess. Dringo, how are you doing, man? You good? Obviously, Chris is from gamesindustry.biz, the man behind the numbers over there. Are you well? Are you going to a curry tonight or anything like that?
I'm not. No, Andy did invite me, but I'm washing my hair, so I wasn't able to make it.
Invite his mum instead, I reckon.
Yeah, I'll pass the invitation on.
Is this what we've become?
But I'm good. I'm good.
Now. Good to hear.
It's sort of a quiet before the E3 storm, I feel, this week. But it's going
to be very quiet. It's going to be very quiet, and then it can be very, very, very noisy. And there's loads and loads to talk about today.
Everything's going to kick off next week, I think.
Bring it on. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the title hack himself, Christopher Scullion. How you doing, Chris? You good, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Being based in Scotland, neither myself nor my mother will be attending the curry tonight, so sad times. But I'm sure they'll have a dry meat in my honour. So
definitely.
So to summarise, everyone in this podcast has blown out the VGC curry tonight.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's pretty hard to get to at the moment.
To be fair, yeah, two of you are far up north.
From Edinburgh.
Yeah, just popping down to London from Edinburgh or Manchester or whatever.
I'm gonna FaceTime you from behind my chicken booner.
Do it, man. I'll sit there. Booner away from me. One day we'll meet in person. Like literally, you guys all met. I mean, obviously you used to have met in person at least, and I've never even met like Andy, and this is my boss. You know what I mean? So this is crazy, but that's life. That's pandemic life. Should we talk about video games? Anyway, this is VGC. Every Friday, of course, we go off the record to deliver you the most considered, most informative takes on all the big stories from the world of video games. And if you're a fan of this and you like looking at our faces, you can catch us every Friday afternoon over on our YouTube channel. VGC's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. But that's not your thing and you want to listen on the go. We are, of course, on all major podcast providers, so you've got no excuse whatsoever to miss the latest episode of Off the Record. Genuinely, we've got an awful lot on today. Sometimes these days come around when you've got nothing on and you're scraping over sales figures for Resident Evil, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. And other days you've got loads and loads of stories, and this is that kind of day. These are your headlines for today. We got the Summer Games Fest. It's back and confirmed for a June the 10th showcase ahead of E3. And Chris and Andy were talking to Jeff Keighley. Did we decide it's Keighley pronounced, isn't it? I hope I'm right on that one. Either way, sorry, Jeff, if you're watching. And of course, the second story of the day, we got Zelda Skyward Sword HD is getting an amiibo with a very useful feature. Timesplitters could be back. Free Radical has reformed to work on a new game. Bethesda's Starfield is exclusive to Xbox and PC. It's been claimed. And the final story of the day, well, there's two stories. We've had hands-on this week with Deathloop and Ascent. We'll be getting to all of them. But let's start, of course, with Summer Games Fest. And I'll read a little bit of a piece you can find over on videogameschronicle.com where Andy and Chris interviewed the man behind Summer Games Fest. The Game Awards founder, Jeff Keighley, has announced plans for Summer Games Fest, including a kickoff live show featuring world premieres on June the 10th, 2 days before E3 officially launches. Whilst last year's inaugural Summer Games Fest featured a series of consumer-focused digital events between May and August, Organiser Keeley told VGC's 2021's All Digital Festival will be more condensed in line with fan feedback. It promises a memorable month of announcements and updates that overlap with E3, including events like Ubisoft Forward on June the 12th, which will be co-streamed by Summer Game Fest and E3 organiser, the ESA. How was he? Was he good? Was he well? What did you make of the kickoff live announcements, Andy?
So both Chris Dring and I interviewed him separately. Dringo obviously spoke to him for GI.biz. I've spoken to Jeff a few times in the past, both in my capacity as a journalist and not a journalist. He's a really, really nice guy. The thing that comes across when you actually speak to him is that he's just so incredibly passionate about building these events that he does. I mean, it's easy to forget when you're just, on the consumer side watching him from a YouTube window, that the huge amount of work that it takes to build those events. And he does it because he's passionate. He's been around for years and years and years. And I mean that in a complimentary way. Kind of as a journalist, as a teenager, kind of famously, blagging his way over to Valve to interview those guys. And I admire that, to be honest, especially to keep that passion up for so long. I mean, eventually, again, this isn't a criticism, but eventually press get to a certain age and then they just pack it in and go and do marketing or whatever. But he's still really passionate about talking about the games industry, about building events and content around video games. And I think he's in the overall, he's done a lot of good for games.
I would argue he kind of is packed it all into doing marketing in many ways. But I don't mean that in an offensive way either. You're right. I think he's done I think he's very clever. He's not actually doing a lot. He's done a 2-hour and a bit event where he's going to stand in front of a room full of, and announce 12 games or 12 things related to a game, like an Among Us map or something like that. And then he called it Kickoff Live, and because everyone else is running loads of events very close to each other throughout June, he's made it look like, and he's not pretending he's doing this, but he's managed to give himself that almost ownership over a month of video game announcements and events simply by doing 1 2-hour show. Which, don't be wrong, that 2-hour show is going to have a lot in it, and he's got Weezer and he's got a load of cool stuff going on. I'm sure it's a massive amount of work, but like that's ultimately what he's doing, and it's created he's effectively stuck an event before E3 and he's claiming
he's kicking off E3, right? He actually is.
Yeah.
Like he is.
Even though, and I have to admire the audacity and the genius behind it. I think it's
the audacity.
You're right, man. It is audacious.
It is good to hear that it's more condensed this year because, like last year, like you said earlier, it was like 4 months of it. And that you get a kind of burnout after a while, especially because it gets to the point where like Dringo says, like he's just basically going like that's mine, like pissing on loads of things and like to claim ownership of them. And it got to the point by August, it was like, yep, that's mine as well. And you're like, right, okay, but it's good to see that it's all kind of.
I mean, it's definitely better. It's definitely better. I mean, there's actually to get to the actual details, there's a tangible 2-hour show. It might actually be a bit longer than that because they're doing something called Day of the Devs, which is Double Fine's like indie showcase, and it's always really good. Like they used to hold it at GDC, and they'll just have like 10 amazing indie games that over the next year everyone will hear about, but at the time they're kind of less known, and they get to just show them. I got to show Ukulele one year, and I absolutely shat my pants, like properly, because they hold it. They hold it in a theatre, right?
Literally,
a theatre. They hold it in a theatre. Yeah, literally. They hold it in a theatre. So you're like standing on a huge stage, showing your game in front of an like seated audience. And I don't know if any of you have any experience of this, but let me tell you, it's really hard to play a game and talk about it at the same time, like on a script. That is why whenever you see, live demos or whatever, there's usually 2 people because it's bloody hard, right? It's a skill. So I just had to constantly like stop moving around to talk about my script. But anyway, I'm going off script.
Off the record, you could say.
Summer Game Fest. No, so it's definitely an improvement. Yeah, there's a tangible thing. Last year was messy, right? We all know that. And actually, he was a bit defensive about that when I spoke to him. rightly, where he was like, look, the world was a mess, you know. That's kind of like the fact that we got an event done and, you know, consoles and games came out last year is an achievement, right? And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that I quite like the transparency where he's not hiding anything. It's like Summer Game Fest is this, you know, 2-hour show plus Day of the Devs, and then they are co-streaming other publishers' things. It's like it's not a secret. This is when Ubisoft held Ubisoft Forward is the example he used. It is Ubisoft's event, right? And it will be co-streamed by Summer Game Fest, but also E3. So the big difference between the two right now is that E3 are still not talking about and clarifying what on earth they're doing, right? Because ultimately, I'm surprised there's not more talk about this. You know, one of the big, I mean, I'm probably hamming it up a little bit, but obviously one of the clear ramifications of that is like, well, how much of E3 is actually going to not be like Summer Game Fest was last year? Like publishers are just doing stuff and they're putting an E3 badge on it because, you know, there's no chance that publishers are paying ESA those money.
Is there a hunger for this though? Like it once, because E3's back this year, and it's notably that Summer Games Fest is already smaller than it was. I mean, and once it's back and everything's more in person, does this carry on in the same way next year, Dringo? Does it? Because it's obviously, is it just a couple of good years maybe for this, and can it evolve into something different? Well,
I really question the hybrid. So I work in events really. I mean, I run games in shop, but I also work for Reed Pop that run PAX. I have and there's no. I think there's a little bit of a concern around what happens next for physical events. How big are they going to be? Will people want to come? I think right now everyone wants to. You know, we were talking before this about going to pubs and gigs and everything like that. We're all eager to get out there, but will we be after a while? Will it start to roll back a little bit? Nobody really knows. We'll see that play out. But the thing is with the digital events is the great thing about it is the inclusivity and accessibility of these things, right? So I run a business event called the Investment Summit, and normally it's like in London and Seattle. You have to go to London and Seattle to meet investors to get your game signed. But when I went online, you didn't have to go anywhere. You could be in Australia, you could be in India, you could be anywhere in the world. You have to fly to pay for a hotel. It made the event accessible to everybody, and that's really good. E3's already been a digital event in exactly the same way Andy was just explaining it. Like none of Ubisoft's press conference at E3, Sony's, Microsoft, they're not E3's events. They were run by those companies. They just happened to take place around E3, and E3 is just a room where people play games. Really, that's all it's ever been. And so its role in this has become like, what does it do now? You know, it's not. It can't be a room with to play games in right now. And that's why Ubisoft's like, why would I give you a load of money for this when we would do it ourselves, and we always did do it ourselves. But I do think what E3 might need to do is to make it a little bit more be a bit more accessible to the rest of the world, to open itself up in a way that it's never done to before. But it's never really been a digital event. E3, the press conferences have, but the show itself hasn't. So I think we'll probably see a bit of a hybrid, a little bit of accessibility. But I have doubts over all of it. You know, I mean, E3's got bigger challenges. Like they had challenges before they came into this. Like people weren't sure its role in the games industry, and why it does. You know, why do you need to go there? It sort of invites some consumers in, but not a lot. It's quite a rubbish business event, really, because it's just loud, noisy, and busy, and it's not the sort of place you get to do business, not properly. Everyone does it at the hotel, the Marriott across the road. So it's a great event. It's a wonderful moment in the games industry, but I think its role has become under pressure, and I don't think the pandemic's fixed anything or broken anything. I think the problems are still there. But yeah, I did ask Jeff actually about, you know, what happens next year for Summer Games Fest, you know, when physical's back, what role does it play? And he talked about maybe doing physical events himself, perhaps around the world, in Europe and Asia as well. So who knows? I mean, I do have to say though, it's called Summer Games Fest. The one criticism I have is like, it's only summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's already a sort of it's already a sort of not inclusive event, global event like E3 is. E3's global. So one global games event I think there is. That Gamescom's still very European and Tokyo Game Show is very Japanese, and E3, even though it's run by Americans, it's like everyone in the world knows about E3. Everyone tunes in everywhere.
The thing about E3 that always kind of appeals to me, and putting aside the way it's run and the way all that stuff, is the fact that everything is contained within a week, and it feels like an event. It's like it's the equivalent of going to a music festival versus 20 concerts spread out over 4 months. And
Yeah.
it's the week that everyone gets excited about, and then fair enough, the press get exhausted that 1 week, but there's the adrenaline keeps you going all the way through it, and it's the excitement of everyone coming together for 1 week to just go, here's everything. And then after that week, you then spend time kind of dissecting and digesting everything you've just seen, and it's the excitement around it. The whole gaming industry just kind of builds up to this one big thing, and then comes down, and it's like a big wave that comes. The last year's one, because it was like 4 months worth of things all with this banner attached to it, just felt like a kind of there was never one big everyone was just kind of and I don't know, it didn't feel quite as exciting to me. But so hopefully this one,
there was a lot of disappointment as well, right? Because we're sort of like, that one's rubbish. But there's another one in 2 months, and I was a Nintendo fan. Nintendo didn't show up until September, so the whole thing was really like, for crying out, when are we? It was frustrating. But as Andy points out, Jeff defends this. I'm not blaming anybody for that situation. That was the result of COVID. That wasn't anyone's fault.
Yeah, of course.
It just was a bit, it was a bit shit. And I am pleased they've managed to make it work. And I think, if you're going to do it digitally, there's no reason to be on top of each other. There is, give yourself a couple of days between the announcements and stuff like that.
I already think it's going to be a lot better this year. I really do. It looks like there's a lot of stuff happening next month. It's more self-contained. It looks like even in that E3 week, right, we're potentially going to have, up to 10 different shows. So that kind of feels a bit more like an E3, doesn't it?
Mm. I'm excited for the kickoff show because it sounds like it's basically going to be the Game Awards without the awards, which was kind of like what you get the feeling the Game Awards always wanted to be anyway. So I'm up for that. Yeah, exactly. So it sounds like
I think we have to taper our expectations generally, but also with that because he might get like a tease from Ubisoft, but Ubisoft are going to do an event 2 days later, right? So they're not going to. It's not going to be a major, is it? Surely.
You wouldn't fix
it. He said to me that the majority of the companies named, which was over 30 companies, will have some sort of content in the kickoff. But he said it's a mix, basically. Yeah. There'll be some world exclusives. There'll be some where companies will just hold stuff for their own shows, and there'll be some where they'll do both. Yeah. He said there also might be the case where they might announce something at the kickoff show, and then you'll see more of it, from the E3 bits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like they did Assassin's Creed last year when they announced it and then a week later put it in the Xbox show. And,
Yeah. Let's talk about Skyward Sword. Let's talk about Zelda Skyward. Basically, Zelda Skyward Sword HD is getting an amiibo with a very useful feature. Obviously, once again, you can find this over on videogameschronicle.com. Nintendo's revealed a new amiibo that will released alongside The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. The amiibo features Zelda and a Loftwing and can be used in the game to get around quicker. In the original version on the Wii, Link can travel from the surface to the sky by visiting certain locations and selecting the To the Sky option. Players with Zelda and the Loftwing amiibo will now be able to tap it on the controller at any point and travel to the sky no matter where they are on the surface, which is interesting. There's a big debate about this actually. What I will say is like the idea of including features that probably should be actually in the core game anyway, arguably would make it a quality of life improvement, just hiding them behind an amiibo. I mean, everyone will have different opinions on this. For me, I don't think it's a really good shout, but I understand why they're doing it. We'll go to you first, Chris, because obviously you are the amiibo king. I mean, there's like 1 billion on the shelf behind you, for what I can tell. Well, I presume you'll be getting this. It's a beautiful little amiibo for what it's worth, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I'll be getting it anyway just because I collect them. I've never really been massively fussed about their functionality, so I'm maybe not the best person to be slamming it. But I personally just don't think. I wrote a big kind of opinion piece on the site about it this week, where like there's obviously the internet being the internet. This has become a big massive drama that this feature that should have been in the game has now been put behind amiibo. But my take is just that it's boring. It's a boring feature. It's not that exciting. Like I don't give a shit whether it's in the game or in an amiibo. I don't care. Fast travel is not really a glamorous thing.
It was a tedious game, though. It was a tedious game, Skyward Sword. There was a lot of travelling, a lot of back travelling, and I must admit, it drove me mad. And that's I've tried to replay it a couple of years back. And
I think it's the only Zelda game I've not finished.
Same.
Oh, I did, but it was a chore. It
is.
I'm looking forward to playing that. I'm actually looking forward to playing it. Because I won the 3D Zelda game I've never done. I've also got I've not got as many as Chris. I've got about 140 amiibo. And I think the only time I've ever used an amiibo is to get a Pona in Breath of the Wild. I think I put Wolf Link in briefly just to see it. I was most delighted reading your piece, Chris, to find out that my Box Boy amiibo is worth a lot of money. That's
worth a fortune. I know. But when that came out, I got a guy in Japan who was like a reader of my stuff, and he said, "Oh, I can buy you if you want." I was like, "Yeah, okay," because it was just like in the shops in Japan. He bought it for like a tenner and sent it over, job done, and now it's like $300 or something.
I think I bought it for like 30 quid.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing is with amiibo is that they aren't proper toys to life. Like Toys to Life, the whole idea was like the toys are integral part of the gameplay. They've always been. I mean, there might be some exceptions. Chris will know better than me. But they've always basically been cheats. Right, so you put them in, and it gives you some hearts, gives you some ammo, gives you an extra character to help you beat things, or it might give you some extra costumes. This seems from what the thing is, they don't actually manufacture that many amiibo because I see the sales figures. They don't make a lot, and it's not because they're trying to stop scalpers. It's not because they're trying to encourage scalpers or anything like that. Amiibo sales have actually fallen quite a bit, which is the reason why Nintendo don't make nearly as many as they used to. And they don't sell out nearly as fast as they used to. I've not actually missed one now in years, I don't think. So they're not quite as popular, which is the reason why I'm thinking that this isn't as big as Chris was suggesting. Isn't that big a deal? I'm assuming if this was a proper cool gameplay function, like they're going to sell out of this amiibo, right? They're going to sell this toy. They're going to manufacture this toy. Everyone will buy one, and they'll be fine with it. It's not like they needed to put something really good behind it to encourage people to spend money on it. So I have to just assume that it's not something the developers wanted in the game normally, right? They don't want you to be able to do it. And I assume because the ability to jump out of a dungeon, mid-dungeon, fly to the shop, buy yourself some extra items and fly back is cheating. So I'm assuming that's the thinking behind it. The only thing is, that's my assumption behind it. There's a lot of people on the internet thinking it's just Nintendo trying to make more money, but people are buying that. Amiibo looks awesome. I looked at it and I thought, I'm getting myself that, and it had nothing to do with the functionality.
I mean, I think one of the probably the big issue with this one is that a lot of people think that this should be something that should be in a remaster anyway, right? Like it's Wind Waker HD. They added kind of fast travel to that to get rid of to eliminate a flaw from the original game. It's quite tedious.
Chopped the tingle thing down as well, didn't they? The rupees tingle thing at the end. So they did a lot of changes to that.
There's a lot of tedious things with Skyward Sword, and one of them is obviously the fact that you have to go and there's all this annoying padding to go back to what is the sky place called? Skyloft.
Skyloft, yeah.
And so it kind of feels like there's something that should be in the main game. And it's just highlighted a bigger issue. I mean, me and Chris were talking about this because I'm another sad amiibo collector. Not anymore. It was more. I think I realised once I started VGC that it was a vessel for my depression because I don't care. Because I don't care about them anymore. Like literally, the other day I put them in a box. Like amiibos came out month I was made redundant from VGC. Right?
It's a damn shame.
Oh no, but I think Nintendo just mismanaged them. Even let's talk about them from a collector's point of view, right? The functionality is definitely shitter than it was. When they were doing the reading and writing to them with Smash Brothers, that you could create an AI character that mimicked learned from your play style and save it to a figure so that you could then theoretically take it to a friend's house. That's like kind of typical Nintendo idea. And then it just sort of descended into, you can have a Mario hat. And then it got even worse than that right now where it's like, you can just cheat. But even from a collecting point of view, I'm someone who stopped collecting them, right? As I said, in all seriousness, I do think like on the month I got made redundant, Nintendo sent me a bunch. And then it was Christmas when they came out. My girlfriend bought me like, I think let's say there was 15 out at launch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She bought me like the other 7. So I had about 10 and I was missing only 5. And you're not going to have 10 out of 15, are you? No. So then I went scouring around London and found the other 5 and they were really rare then and everyone was after them. So then you're not going to have 15 when they bring out another 5 2 months later, are you? Then you buy those 5. But they mismanaged them because after a while that sort of got to catch them all nature, the collecting incentive died for me because eventually they just started bringing out absolute bullshit reprints. Like how many different variations. It's like, oh, there's a Mario Family collection on top of the Smash collection, and then like Mario Odyssey, and they just feel like really disjointed. And then they started bringing out the ultra rare ones that we're never going to get, basically. Like, oh, so there's like 5 Dragon Quest ones, and then there's 5 gold Dragon Quest ones that you can only get if you're a convenience store. Well, you've just killed it for me. So I'm never going to have all of them, basically. Yeah. That's impossible to get. Well, like, oh, here's Mario.
Like a bit bear man, to be honest.
Here's Silver Mario, and here's Gold Mario. Oh, piss off.
There aren't that many.
You need to get good. You need to get good at collecting amiibo.
I'm annoyed because I've got 4 left to get. Not counting those gold Monster Hunter ones because they can fuck off. Like like you say, if you can only get them in a lottery in a convenience store in Japan, they don't count. I'm not counting those. But the one that count,
unfortunately,
the one that has annoyed me. No, the one that has annoyed me for years is the gold Mega Man, which Capcom bundled with a Mega Man Legacy collection on the 3DS in America, and when they announced it, I was like, okay, that's cool, I'll wait till it comes out in Europe and buy it. It didn't come out in Europe, and by the time it was clear it wasn't coming out in Europe, they were already charging 60, 70, 80 quid for the gold Mega Man, and now it's like 150 quid. I'm like, well, I'm never getting that, and that's like one of 4 I've left to get, and I'm just raging at that. But
my amiibo approach was similar to Andy's at the beginning, and I changed it. I didn't give up entirely. I just now only buy them from franchises that I have a particular strong attachment to. So I've stopped buying the Animal Crossing ones. I got a load of those, and I was like, you know what, I'm not actually a big obsessive. I like Animal Crossing, but not that much. So I stopped doing that. You know, I've got Pit. I wouldn't buy any more Kid Icarus ones if any more came out. You know, those sort of ones. I don't know why I bought the Dark Souls one. I got that quite recently. I don't get the Street Fighter ones. You know, I didn't get the Joker one. I got Banjo though, and I'll get this Zelda one. I got the 3D World ones because I'm a big fan of those games. So I've sort of moved into just getting the ones that I have a strong attachment to. I've also not boxed up all of them. I've got my Zelda ones. So, I mean, give an example, right? The Zelda ones, 13 of them, I think I don't know how many the Zelda ones are, 19, 20, 13 of them are Link.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that just killed the collect. There's so many amazing Nintendo characters that don't have amiibo, like the cast of Star Fox and stuff like that, right?
There's so many Zelda characters.
I've got about 10 Links. I've got about 4 Zeldas. You know, like I've got about 3 Donkey Kongs.
Yeah, I'm not the best person to be having this discussion because it's like an illness for me. Where like, I can look up.
Is it not a depression vessel?
Lucky the camera's pointing this way and not that way because I've got every Disney Infinity figure, every Lego Dimensions figure, and every amiibo Chris, up there. And it's
Chris, the Skylanders amiibo. Do you have both of them and both colours, the dark version?
Two of those are among the 4 I need. So I've got the Donkey Kong.
There's a dark version?
Bowser. Yeah, they did standard Bowser.
Skylanders. Sorry, I thought you said Skyward Sword.
Oh yeah, they did a Bowser and a Donkey Kong to go in the Wii U in 3DS version of Skylanders, and I've got each of those. But then they did dark versions, which are like 30 quid each now, and it's not too bad, but I still kind of grudge it. So those are 2 of the 4 I need. I need those 2. I need the big giant.
Do you need them with the car as well, the vehicle? Because I've got the light ones. I don't have the dark ones. I did the similar thing.
Same, ideally.
This podcast has turned into like a trade session for amiibos.
I have one.
How much you want
one amiibo?
That's all I need. If anyone's listening,
that's the only one I've got. I've got one amiibo,
and it's the worst.
It's the original Link with the best.
It's got a horrible little fucking piss-coloured thing there. Yeah, what's that about? Like for audio listeners, you are very lucky right now that you're missing out on this. But basically, amiibos, man, they're everywhere. And if you want one, go and get one. If you want the Skyward Sword one, the game, for what it's worth, has anyone got any expectations for the game? Personally, it's going to be the same version, isn't it? I don't think it's going to be a Wind Waker level remaster, is it? It's just going to be.
I think they will. Yeah.
I don't think it will be. Personally,
they're charging $60 for it.
Has that ever stopped Nintendo?
That's the thing that more people should be complaining about. Everyone's complaining about fucking fast travel like anyone cares. It's the price that's the big surprise for me. Although obviously
they did quite a lot with Wind Waker,
but it's like.
I think there'll be an equivalent level. Yeah, I mean, for a start, they've put entirely new controls in the game.
Yeah,
fair enough. I'll give you that.
I think
maybe I'm wrong.
It's worth noting that with Nintendo are value orientated, so they're very much thinking long term for their brands. So for them, one of the reasons I think that Super Mario 3D All Stars doesn't exist anymore is because actually it devalued the other Mario games. Because you've got 3 Mario games in one collection is a better deal than buying Super Mario 3D World. So they're very value conscious, and the reason why you're not going to get a 3D Zelda game for 30 quid is because, you know, let's say Breath of the Wild 2 somehow comes out this year. that's as far as they're concerned, that's a competition. They're competing too much against their big new central games. So that's the reason why their prices are often quite high. It's not a good reason if you're a gamer, but I that's the sort of value thing that they approach.
I saw a thing
game
recently.
pricing.
Someone quoted on Reddit in that new Iwata Asks book that came out, although has been delayed in Britain, annoyingly. Apparently, there's a bit in that where Iwata says we charge a lot of money for our games and don't drop the price right away because we don't want to annoy the people who bought it day one, and we don't want to be in a situation where if that becomes a habit, people won't buy it on day one because they'll say, oh, I'll just wait 2 months until it drops. So they deliberately keep the price high, both because they know people will buy it, and also that they don't want to piss off the people who bought it on day one or encourage people to sit back and
that second point sounds like the kind of thing they say in a meeting was to justify keeping it full price. Like, oh yeah, that's a good moral reason for doing it. But actually, the reason, let's be honest.
But I've got to the point where I'm used to now. If someone said to me, "Oh, it's a new Nintendo game out, it's 50 quid," I'm like, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. You say to me, "Here's a new Ratchet and Clank game out, and it's 60 quid," I go, right? Even though it's
try
and
70.
that's because I know it's 70, but even if it was 50, the last one was £25, right? So I have an expectation of where that pricing should be. Whereas with Nintendo games, I expect them to cost that much. It's the reason why people who go to the cinema are happy going to the cinema for 20 quid just for themselves. Yeah, if Netflix raises the price up for £1, they go, oh, it's like that way people look at value is often what we expect things to cost. And if you expect Nintendo games to cost 50 quid, then you never think you don't really think they're expensive. You don't stop yourself buying them. So value, complicated.
So we talk about Timesplitters. I wonder how much this will cost when it eventually comes out. Who knows? Because it could be a long way. Basically, Timesplitters developer Free Radical Design has been reformed by its original founders. Publisher Deep Silver and its parent company Embracer Group announced on Thursday that the studio had been established as a new company in Nottingham by Steve Ellis and David Doak, who were two of the original company's 4 founders and key developers behind its game. Free Radical will now bring the Timesplitters IP back to life, but development on the new game has not yet started. Embracer Group said, "We have more market demand driven opportunity via innovative concepts, dormant IPs, licenses and other business opportunities than we have the development capability to execute." Thus the ambition is to further expand our creative engine through increased headcount, both organically through scaling up existing studios and also by adding new talented studios to the group. Long story short is it looks like Timesplitters is coming back. Actually, it went on to say, in this context, we're happy to announce the formation of a new studio, Free Radical Design, based in Nottingham, UK. This Deep Silver studio will bring the much-loved Timesplitters IP back to life. Key original members include founders Steve Ellis and David Doak. This highly respected team has a 22-year heritage of making AAA games. Where's the excitement levels at? I know I was a Nintendo kid, so I didn't really play Timesplitters as much when I was growing up. I was more GoldenEye, but I know a lot of people loved it. Andy, are you a big Timesplitters guy? Are you excited for this? Is it one of those things that we're going to hear for 4 years? And
I was like more of a Nintendo guy then, so I wasn't big into Timesplitters at the time. I played Timesplitters 2 since, and it's awesome. Soundtrack's amazing, but I was always more on the. I mean, they left after GoldenEye, right? So I was playing Perfect Dark at that point. Yeah, I think they were there like right at the start of Perfect Dark, right?
Yeah, the first couple of years.
I love the original so much. It's one of like 3 or 4 games in my life that have made me extremely motion sick, but I still played it and just kind of played through the pain. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. I guess maybe just because at the time it was kind of early PS2 was the first one, I think, and we'd just gone through a generation of games on PS1 and such, and the N64 where smooth frame rates weren't exactly the done thing, and then suddenly we're back on PS2 and we're back up to solid 60 frames a second for a lot of games, and I think just my stomach couldn't cope with that, especially because nowadays a lot of FPS games have like a cursor in the middle to prevent motion sickness, and Timesplitters didn't have one of those, and I just get ill very quickly, but still loved it despite. It's one of the few games I've actually made myself ill to play because I enjoyed it that much.
I was not expecting that story, but there you go. Made you vom. But there we go. So Timesplitters made us vom, headline of the video. What about yourself, Dringo? Are you? Go on.
Yeah, well, I'm a Nintendo boy as well, but because I'm a Nintendo boy is why I'm a Timesplitters fan. Like the first Timesplitters was a PlayStation 2 exclusive, and I was. No,
I resented them.
And yeah, I did initially.
I was the same.
Because I'd lost Perfect Dark to Xbox by that point when Timesplitters 2 launched, I was like fully on board. with that game, and I really enjoyed it. You know, the single player was rubbish. It was a very multiplayer oriented game. It had the silly sort of humour that Perfect Dark and GoldenEye had that I don't think we often talk about very much. And I sort of really enjoyed it. Yeah. I'm excited that it's coming back. It's old enough to hit the nostalgia, but 20 years is the gap to be nostalgia hit, right? So that's where Timesplitters sits. But the thing that surprised me a little bit is that Koch, or Deep Silver, whatever you want to call them, already own the original Free Radical design company, because Free Radical Design was bought by Crytek UK. Crytek UK ran out of money and ended up just giving the studio to Deep Silver, who turned it into Dambuster Studios, who are making the new Dead Island game. So they've got Free Radical. So when they said we're now opening a new studio called Free Radical, my immediate assumption was they were rebranding Dambusters is back to Free Radical.
It's weird. It's all a bit of a mess, right? Because the IPs weren't with Dambuster though. They had to go out and buy them separately. So they've got Timesplitters and they've got Second Sight, I think. So I actually, obviously, I have to be careful what I say because I know a lot of the people behind this. I get the impression that, I mean, obviously, Steve Ellis joined. It's so difficult to keep track of what bloody company is what inside of Embracer and THQ and Koch and Deep Silver, isn't it? Let's say Deep Silver. He joined Deep Silver, in 2019? So he's been there for like 2 years by this point. Because before then, he was running a indie studio called Crash Labs, which was nearby to us when we were at Playtonic. So they were making like small mobile games and stuff. So obviously he's packed that into. They're obviously very, very big at reviving IPs. The Embracer family, as we will now call them. So obviously, I get the impression they probably got him on board to do it. And he's been knocking around for a while. And my guess is, and I don't know this for sure, is that they were looking for perhaps an external studio to help them make this game. And they've just sort of like decided, look, shall we just make one, But there's definitely a story there somewhere, isn't there, about Dambuster? Because as you say, Dringo, like Dambuster is Free Radical. And it comes back to the old argument, right, that we've had before on this podcast.
Like, they already exist in the same city.
They're probably in the same building, right? But that comes back to the old argument that we've had on here, which is like, what is a company, Because it hasn't been called Free Radical. It changed names twice since then. How many people are actually there? I mean, there will be some, because Graham Norgate, the composer who did GoldenEye and all the Timesplitters games, he only left a similar time. That's bloody suspicious, by the way. I sent him a text and he's not replied. So I don't know if he's gone to... But he was a co-founder as well of Free Radical. So I would not be surprised if he ends up there, because he's ominously not replied to me. But on the popularity thing, I'm not convinced, that... I mean, the Embracer Deep Silver THQ guys, and I don't seem to be particularly bothered about an IP's reach when they go and revive it, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be like digging up THQ's like old archive from 15 years ago, like Destroy All Humans and stuff.
Yeah.
But this is no way a science, but you can usually tell from our own site's traffic, like, the interest around a topic, right? And we've actually broken some fairly decent stories on Timesplitters over the last couple of years, because Steve Ellis had a chat with me about, just some broad quotes about, I can't wait to go back to the series and blah, blah. Nobody read any of these. Yeah. You always get like the same people on Twitter, like it's a nostalgia thing, right? But these stories have never done well for us. And again, it's not a science, but it does make me think like, well
compare that to
are people really excited about
GoldenEye interest? I can imagine GoldenEye is a different
GoldenEye went mad. Yeah.
So Andy's right. I don't actually think the nostalgia opportunity here is that high. I think it's Star Wars Episode 1 Racer level, because the sales of the original Timesplitters was never massive. It was never a huge franchise. But I think why it might have a chance is that we live in an age of games back then, sort of silly first-person shooters, they weren't a thing. It was all Halo and Medal of Honor. And nowadays it's all Fortnite, it's an Overwatch and big, colourful, ridiculous silliness and sort of more accessible. I kind of feel Timesplitters would work in a modern games industry better than it did when it was there at the sort of gritty era.
Yeah, that's what Steve told me. He said he thought it was ahead of its time.
So I think it might not be a nostalgia opportunity. I think it might be a modern games thing. It's got a little fan base.
is it that good? But those games exist, you know. Like people are so loyal to these games, like Fortnite and Overwatch and all that kind of stuff. And Warzone as well has been huge. And you're right that it's very much of this time. Now I do agree with that. But then, you know, a lot of the younger audience that are playing Fortnite and whatever, are they going to be bothered by Timesplitters? You know, so are they going to?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I think the thing is, Timesplitters isn't like Fortnite, because Fortnite's a big online community. It calls itself a metaverse, that kind of stuff. I think Timesplitters should still keep to the idea. There aren't games like Timesplitters anymore. They don't make them like that. They don't make games like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye and stuff. I miss them from a nostalgic perspective, and I'll be interested to see if the fact that they have that sort of look that modern gamers might be attracted to, but has that sort of old school gameplay that doesn't exist anymore, if it might find an audience. But at the same time, it's being published by Deep Silver and Koch. It's not like it's a big EA play here, so I don't know. But I'm glad it's happening, because I like those sort of games, and I think it'd be fun. But I don't know how big it will.
I mean, it's good news that they've got got David Doak and Steve on, though, to be fair, because they were the co-directors of the game, right? Mm-hmm. So arguably the two most important people on the project. I mean, they've had a long time to think about this as well and plan it.
Yeah.
So I'd say at the very least, I'm confident that they're going to put out a good game.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I spent 2 weeks testing Haze, so I have my free radical horror stories.
Well, but there's the other thing as well, is that you have to. This is the thing that people don't see about game development, right? I mean, they were an independent company in the worst time for independent companies, right? During that 360 PS3 generation, where anyone who was like AA just went bust. Mm. They would have been terrified of just getting the game out and making money to pay the bills.
Yeah.
It's mad that we're talking about Timesplitters and all I think of as GoldenEye when you say David Doak. He was in the game, wasn't he? I swear that rings a bell for me. Yeah, he was. It always rings a bell. Either way, let's talk about Bethesda. Let's talk about games that won't be coming out this year. According to a latest report, Bethesda's sci-fi RPG Starfield will be exclusive to Xbox and PC and thus won't be released for PlayStation 5. It's been claimed. And that's according to GamesBeat journalist Jeff Grubb, who wrote on Friday, Starfield is exclusive to Xbox and PC, period. This is me confirming that. Speaking in a live stream video, the prominent games industry reporter went on to state that he believed the title would appear at E3 next month and likely release in 2022. Of course, it's the next big RPG from the creator of The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim. Guys, is it any surprise, really? I mean, it's contentious. It's very difficult. I could never decide if it's going to be on PS5 or it's going to be not, or it's going to, because you spend that much money, then give it to Sony, given the acquisition and all that kind of stuff. And I personally don't think it's a surprise whatsoever that it's going to be 2022. I think that was always a given, really. Go on.
There's another part to that story. Jason Schreier posted subsequently this week that he says he understands through his sources that the plan is to show the game at E3 with a tentative release date, which he believes is going to be late 2022. So it's all starting to fall into place, Dringo, for your recent prediction that
my recent controversial opinion that games that are clearly far away are far away.
Was it an opinion?
How dare you?
Your recent controversial information that Xbox exclusives might not be as close as people think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if many people really thought it. I interestingly, when I started talking about Xbox's first big game being Halo, a load of people started tweeting me, and Starfield, and I'm like, really? I mean, we have got into. I know Bethesda has before announced a game at E3 and then released it that Christmas. They did it with Fallout 4.
Yeah, typically that is what they do, though. Typically, they announce a game and they release it 6 months later. But this game was announced in 2018.
Yeah. We live in a COVID world, you know. I think even if that was what they were hoping to do this time, and Xbox have sort of they've done a PlayStation. They've kind of over-announced stuff, right? They've sort of shown us things that are only just started development, which means if any of them enters any form of development problems, they might even get restarted a few times. You know what this industry's like. So, but Starfield's probably. I don't think it's a bad thing, 2022, because they've got Halo this Christmas and they can go all in on that, and there's probably a Forza game, I'm assuming, somewhere. So they've got a couple of big exclusives. There's also a load of other big games coming out. We talked about Far Cry. There's Dying Light. There's Battlefield 6, and there'll be all the Call of Duties and the normal games like that. So there's quite a few sizable games coming out towards the end of the year anyway. There's no need for a Starfield to be in that, and I think fans will have plenty to play. It
just we've had this rant before, right? But it still baffles me that Xbox aren't just pumping out first-party games left, right, and centre by this point. They essentially called the last generation halfway through. They've had so much time, and yet, as you said, they've announced all these games that are seemingly like so far out. I mean, even something like Forza that you would typically expect to fit soon within their release cycle, that looks miles out. I don't get it. I mean, something like Everwild as well, which is another great example of that XO19 show where, you know, they were just announcing stuff left, right, and centre. I mean, that game's super early as well.
I mean, my perception is that I'm not a game journalist like you guys. I've just talked about games and videos with you guys. But my perception as a layman is that I've watched all these trailers and all that kind of stuff. And I haven't got a Series X because I couldn't get one when it came out. But my head has always been in the place. And imagine I'm the relatively average punter with interesting games. It's always been, if I get a Series X, it's going to be a 2023 thing for me, because that's when I presume those games will be there and ready for me on Games Pass when I get there. And that's my perception as a punter with the likes of Starfield and when Bethesda start churning out all those games. Is that fair? I mean, that's why I feel, and if I'm feeling that just following VGC and, you know, following all the other big companies and watching the press conferences, I mean, maybe they're not bothered by that. My perception, Microsoft. That's what
I was going to say. Is that such a bad thing in Microsoft's eyes, because it is their logic that we don't basically give a shit when people buy it, as long as they buy it. Does it have to be different though?
Because given what Andy was just saying a minute ago, like,
I mean, I'm not to be clear. I'm not commenting on the merit of they need more exclusive games and blah blah blah. The Xbox Series X is a great console at launch. Game Pass is an amazing platform as well. Like, it feels so good to turn on that console and just have everything out in front of you. But I'm just really surprised that they don't have first party content spilling out all over the shop. Yeah. It feels like they've had years to plan for this.
So it's worth remembering that Xbox doesn't run a console, really. They run a Netflix style subscription service. So actually launching two big things at once isn't really a good thing for them, because what you do is Halo comes out and you get loads of people to subscribe to Game Pass. Forget buying an Xbox Series X, subscribe to Game Pass. So you might have an Xbox One, you might have a PC, you might have xCloud. If you I don't know who that is, but you subscribe to one of those services and you're getting Halo and you're playing Halo. Halo's great, and then suddenly you're opened up to Sea of Thieves and Forza Horizon 4 and all those other games and those sort of things. You don't want to suddenly hit them with another massive game. You do need to spread these things out and pace these things out.
But Halo was last year's massive game. Halo was last year's massive game. So where's this year's massive game that's gone back again?
No.
Because we know,
right.
for example, God of War and Horizon.
Disney Plus.
You know, one of them is going to end up slipping into next year. Gran Turismo has already slept into next year.
This year's
Why, in that case,
game,
have they announced Halo and a load of games that aren't coming out for years?
This year's massive game is Microsoft Flight Simulator out this summer on Xbox One.
Andy, last year's big game was Gears Tactics. No, I think Halo was last year's game. I suspect Starfield was supposed to be this year's game. You know, I suspect that was the original plan, but COVID's just knocked all that back. But what you were saying, Stephen, you're right. You do want lots and lots of content. But you're talking about Disney Plus. In actual fact, Disney Plus launched The Mandalorian, didn't it? And that was about it. That was the only new big thing of note. Everything else was
you'd argue that
older stuff and things you could, I can go back and play that. And The Mandalorian was like, here's a reason to subscribe to this. And then once you were in, you had everything else to play. And I think Halo is like that new big thing. They'll market it, they'll talk about it, they'll say, you've got to get Game Pass, you get to play Halo. And then once you're in, you've got hundreds of games to play, loads of games in Game Pass.
No, you're right.
And then it's like, that's the reason, that's the strategy. I don't get me wrong, I'm a spoiled child. I want all the games, I want them now. but for some people, you know, this has got to be a cadence. You see, if they release all of their big games at once, what have they got to convince people to subscribe next? You know, they need
you're making it sound like you know that I'm asking them to release 10 games. Let's get real. They've not released.
No. I agree with you. Like
it came out 6 months ago.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
The disrespect that's been paid to the medium here.
But you know what I mean? Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? I mean, I love my Xbox Series X. I really do. Like a lot of people, I was 360, and then predominantly I played my games on PS4. But I'm really leaning back now on Xbox. I think it's a great console. But I'm just baffled that they haven't just gone all out. in the first 6 months of this console. I really am.
I agree because I think they could have won so many new people over. I feel a lot of people were waiting for an excuse to buy one. Maybe it'll happen in 2 years, as I was saying, but I personally was ready to jump on that, presuming they would have come out with something a little bit more. And I understand the COVID world, I understand things have been delayed, but I was expecting something. Yeah. I don't know what, but I was expecting a little bit more.
I think what Andy's saying, I completely agree with him, is that Xbox should have, PlayStation had such a big generation. They had so many games to launch. Their final year on PS4 was mental in terms of the quality and the amount of games they launched. And then they went to PS5 and they were just carrying on as they just left off. Here's a load of games, and they kept going. And you're like, well, I thought you would be the folks that were going to struggle because you're still making games for your big audience on PS4. And Xbox, who'd sort of just given up and moved on to the next machine, would have been the ones ready to hit the ground running, and they haven't been. They've also manufactured fewer Xboxes, right? There are fewer Xboxes in the market, so they seem to be. But I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if they're because there's not enough consoles out there. People can't buy them as it is.
Yeah,
there's probably a logic to it in that. But I think if you're an Xbox owner or thinking about becoming an Xbox owner, there's not a lot of reason.
There is one exciting game coming out soon though, Psychonauts, right? Like I can't wait for that game. Do you know what? I'm gonna say some absolute nonsense now, but someone can look it up and they can correct my nonsense. But I went to visit. No, you won't be able to do it on live. I went to visit Double Fine when I was working on Ukulele. Because again, we did Day of the Devs, the place where I literally shat myself on the stage, and I got to meet all of the Psychonauts 2 team. So by the way, again, that highlights how long that game has been in development. Yeah. Christ, if we were working on Ukulele for as long as they were working on that, we would have released the best game of all time. So I am expecting a great game. But I was introduced to the leads of that game. The guys who are heading up that game, the leads, are like top men. Like to I don't know where that quote's from. Like,
but
you're referring to like the FBI,
they're good developers.
They have got
nice
top
lads.
men, top men. I'm sure it's like the lead designer of like BioShock 2 and stuff like that. And there's like some Halo guys, and there's some proper like experienced CVs working on that game. Not to mention, obviously, all of the stupidly extravagant imagination of the creatives of that studio. So I'm expecting that game to be 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
There's another side to this whole thing, by the way, because linked to this whole thing, Xbox and Bethesda Softworks will actually hold a joint conference this summer to introduce players to their upcoming projects. Once again, I'm reading this over on videogameschronicle.com. Matt Booty, sorry, I'm so childish, who heads up Xbox Game Studios, reportedly told French publication Le Figaro that the event would take place in a few weeks, suggesting a mid-June timeframe coinciding with Summer Games Fest and E3 2021. He told the journalist, Chloe, I can't pronounce that either, I'm so sorry, Chloe Boutier, he wrote the article that there was a COVID impact on the production of Xbox Game Studios titles, which slowed down production and mostly impacted original games rather than sequels. He also reportedly said that Microsoft doesn't want its studios to create games based simply on what might work best on Xbox Games Pass. What are we expecting from this joint conference? Could this be the solution to
a load of games for 2060?
Yeah. 2016, well, they're late and they need to crack on.
They're going to
CGI trailers
show
for
off their
stuff
2
they've not
exclusive
started
PlayStation games.
Do you know what I mean? I'm jumping ahead of the gun a bit, right? Because we were going to talk about hands-on stuff. So let's jump to that now anyway. So I didn't play. I got to see Deathloop very recently. So you're kind of seeing this in the COVID world. Some publishers are allowing people to play games like over the cloud, which is what Ubisoft do. Some people are kind of like doing some like PC Steam mischief where they like lock you into a timed demo like EA, and a lot of other companies are just showing you the game being played over a stream and then you can ask some questions. So we got to see quite a substantial bit of Deathloop, and it looks bloody brilliant. It looks excellent. Like genuinely could be the best game out this year. Made by Xbox on PS5. It's just mad to me. Like, I know initially when you see it in paper, where it's like, okay, we're going to honor our exclusive deals. Yeah, I understand. There's probably like, it's probably incredibly complex, the issues that would happen if they were to step back on that. But it looks bloody brilliant. When you actually see it in front of you, it just, the absurdity of it, like, really is hammed up. Like, this would be like the best game on Xbox Series X.
It looks incredible, genuinely. I mean, I've watched the preview as well. I was already invested. Even I know it sounds really kind of lame and all that kind of stuff, but even just the style, the production style, the title screens, the choice of music, I was like, I felt that game as soon as I watched that first trailer. And the fact that the gameplay, the hands-on, looks that good, I am really, really
It's such a great idea. So it's like Majora's Mask, a Majora's Mask shooter without the time limit. So it's not like you're like, oh, you've got to hurry up or you're going to have to restart soon. But everything is like Groundhog Day. It takes place on the same day.
Did anyone play Sexy Brutal, that little indie game?
I did.
Absolutely loved that. I thought it was brilliant. Yeah, because that was time-based as well. You have to work out how to do certain things. I found that I was pretty ill for it. I remember I had a bit of flu, and I lay in bed playing that over the course of 3 or 4 days, and I was obsessed with it. And obviously, it's a very different game to this, but I'm a sucker for games with a time loop. I don't know what it is, and yeah, when you get Majora's as well, which is possibly my favourite Zelda game as well, and if you're talking about that, Andy, that's
so everyone on the island, everyone on this island has got a loop, right? They do the same things. And the whole point of the game is you need to work out, need to eliminate these 7 targets all in the same day. So you need to figure out, it's like a murder mystery almost, except you're doing the murdering. You need to figure out how to get all these, you need to figure out how to get all 7 targets in the same like sort of area so that you can feasibly assassinate them all in the same day to stop the loop. Because the time loop is some like sci-fi nonsense that is there's like machinery and stuff causing it. I don't really know, but you need to so you could go to one area in a day, find out there's a passcode for a room, and then die, and then go back and then go somewhere else and use that passcode, find out bits of information like, oh, I found out that this target is going for lunch here at this time or something, and then try and fit it all together. But there's like added complexity by the fact that obviously there's this second player that was not player. There's this one character who is out to assassinate you, and it's either AI controlled or players can control it, and you can choose that. So it stems from the idea of what if there was one other person on the island who's not in the loop. So there's one target who is unpredictable, and players can jump in and control that character. So it just sounds and looks brilliant.
Yeah,
and it's not coming to Xbox.
And it's not coming to Xbox.
Surely that's timed, though. That's got to be timed.
Yes,
of course it is.
Yeah.
Have you seen the? That reminds me of that new film. Have you seen it? The one with Andy Samberg, which is set on a thing, and he's stuck in a time loop. But so is one other. He's in a time loop, and someone else is as well. And he's so angry for being in a time loop, he keeps killing.
Oh yeah, that looks brilliant.
Andy Samberg's character. So it's more of a rom-com, that one, oddly. But the doesn't sound like it, but it is. I'm really looking forward to Deathloop. I think it's really great.
I don't think I've heard of that film.
No, have I? I've lost Ringo. If anyone else has lost Ringo, but we'll carry on talking anyway. You're there. You're back. He's back. Which goes back to the exclusivity thing. I mean, it will surely be coming to Xbox. You've been playing The Ascent as well, haven't you, Chris, this week?
Yes.
Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's
an Xbox Game Pass game.
Well, that's a game. That's a game coming out on Xbox, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Only on Xbox, it's excellent. From what I've played of it, like Andy says, some developers and kind of publishers are making you kind of stream their games because obviously we can't attend these events. So I kind of streamed a kind of cloud version of it. So obviously with a game that's kind of as fast paced as The Ascent, there was a tiny bit of lag, but nothing drastic enough to make to ruin what was an excellent first couple of hours. It's basically at first glance you look at it, looks like a kind of Diablo type thing, but it actually feels more like a Gears of War type third person shooter at times, because there's a lot of taking cover, and there's ability, if you hold down a trigger, your guy lifts his guns up in the air so you can shoot over scenery. So there's a lot of kind of cover based firing over stuff, which is really satisfying. I really like it. It's got a kind of cyberpunk aesthetic, by which I mean like it looks futuristic. Cyberpunk's come out and ruined.
Appearing out of nowhere.
Cyberpunk the game has ruined that term now. But it just looks, the lighting is fantastic for it's just I was expected to be when the trailer kind of first released for it. I thought that looks quite cool. But now that I've played the first couple of hours, it's like for a game when that comes out on Game Pass, everyone really should give it a go. It's like instant action, and I think it's going to be like a bit of a sleeper hit because it's not the momentum hasn't really built yet. But I think when it comes out, there's going to be a lot of people saying, "Hey, pay attention to this because this is actually excellent." Yeah.
29th of July it's out on Game Pass as well, which is the kind of game maybe that would probably benefit with more people being actually, with the console in the hands, because obviously it looks really, really exciting. You can go check out the actual hands-on preview as well over on VGC. Chris has voiced over hands-on preview of The Ascent and Deathloop. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed all four of us. It's been fun, actually, a nice little quadrant.
It's been a nice change, isn't it?
It's been good. It's been good. Yeah, it's been a nice change. Thank you so much for watching this episode or listening to this episode of VGC Off The Record. Don't forget, if you do like this, make sure to hit subscribe or, follow the podcast on all the major podcast providers. For now, though, make sure you have a wonderful weekend and we'll see you next week.
Bye.